So the Synagogue of Satan is planning a tremendous attack against the Messiah and against his people. You think that these demons want black people who are thinking like that to live? This is why Diabolically Farrakhan warned this government. I understand a new vaccine is on its way to be approved. Well, if you try to force that on us, it's a declaration of war, because we know the aim is to kill us. That's always been your aim. Why should it change today? Well, the so-called 2020 presidential election crisis is involved in this epic attack of the Synagogue of Satan. Now, how so? Again, we're only at the beginning of the horror that is expected or prophesied to ensue. Now, this current election crisis is reminiscent of the conditions surrounding what became known as the infamous Compromise of 1877. Some of the news media, they're trying to compare it to the Gore-Bush controversy, where the Supreme Court had to decide. But they left out this one in 1877, the Compromise of 1877. It was called the Great Betrayal of Black people by some. But to me, that's a misplaced characterization, because a people made by nature to rule us in evil cannot betray us when they do to us what they were made to do. Well, we want to examine this history so that we can set more reasonable expectations on what is happening in this current presidential election crisis. So I have in this here, volume 2 of the secret relationship between blacks and Jews by the Nation of Islam's historical research group. Well, it states regarding the Compromise of 1877, the following. In fact, the so-called Compromise of 1877 could easily be listed among the most significant events in Black American history. It was the backroom political deal involving presidential rivals Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel J. Tilden, in which white Americans, North and South, agreed that after 12 years of emancipation, blacks would be returned to virtual slavery, denied civil rights, and assigned to permanent political, social, and economic inferiority. In November of 1876, America was grappling with fiercely contested presidential election, The candidates appeared to be tied and votes were being challenged amid entirely valid charges of fraud and voter intimidation. The Congress was thrown into disruption as threats of secession, meaning breaking away from the Union, and sectional vitriol filled the chambers. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And we thought that we didn't have corrupt elections before this one. Let's continue. At the root of the conflict was once again the fate of the black man. Since the Civil War, a bitter vanquished plantation elite and their loyal minions seethed over the black man's emergence from abject slavery. This advancement was accomplished under a rigid and humiliating intervention by Yankee troops sanctioned throughout the South, protecting the rights of blacks against the resentful ex-Confederates and their Ku Klux Klan. Now, I'm going to stop here and just say this. We're going to continue. Well, look at today's condition and look at where black people, through our effort of protest and through other sources, generally our enlightenment, meaning when I say sources, I mean social media, but we're enlightened. So as we gain, others have to give up. And it's usually those who have made money and have gotten wealthy off of our misery and destruction. So there's some who don't want to see the 1994 crime bill rolled back. That's why it wasn't rolled back under President Obama. Why? Because somebody is benefiting from free labor. They don't want our schools to give us real education. Why? Because people benefit from our ignorance. They want to keep mischief and social engineering in our communities because they benefit from our self-destruction and criminal activity that destroys our communities. In other words, these are elements of a new plantation. Now let's continue. Southern legislators begin a filibuster and threaten national disorder and even civil war if their man Tilden were not awarded the presidency. And the Hayes camp was just as adamant. After many days of political chaos, a group of politicians from both parties secretly convened at the Wormley Hotel in Washington, D.C., or in Washington, to attempt to resolve the conflict and save the Union from political disaster. On February 26, 1877, a deal was struck that would profoundly affect the course of history of Black people in America. No other event, not the Civil War and not the Emancipation Proclamation, so specifically indirectly affected the future status of Blacks as a whole. The agreement stated that if Hayes were awarded the presidency, he would remove the federal troops in the South, and the former Southern slaveholding class would be free to return to power and establish new forms of slavery, free from federal oversight and control. Now, this historical event gave rise to the infamous Jim Crow social constructs that pervaded America, North and South. It gave rise to mass lynchings, mass murders, racial pogroms, meaning the mass pursuits of destroying the lives of Black people, and general terror against Black people. The towns that Black people had established were destroyed. We only know a few that were firebombed from planes, but all of them were destroyed. And many Black men were hauled into prisons, aberrantly, where they served the rest of their lives in chain gangs. Well, Black people are too far along to be put back in abject slavery. And this ain't 1877. This is 2020, and Allah is in power and He is present. But we're not too far along to be murdered wholesale, especially now that it seems that Black people have taken over the country, meaning our impression is changing America's form. Impression for wanting justice and equality, putting pressure on Caucasian people.